Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to this virtual public hearing on CDA's Neighborhood Transformation and Housing Production Grant Awards. I am a little bit under the weather, so broadcasting live from my home. Hope everyone is doing well and looking forward to the weekend. We have with us today, in addition to myself, a variety of folks on CDA staff who have been working tirelessly to review and make funding awards for neighborhood transformation grants. They include Rashonda Alexander, a city planning executive on our team, Marnita Spite, special assistant for development, Tom Nagel, public information officer, and Mariana Sansone, grants administrator. They are just some of the over 20 folks at CDA who have worked to review these applications. And I want to start off by thanking them for their hard work and thanking you, everyone who applied and who's here today, for the incredibly impressive applications that frankly overwhelmed us in terms of both their volume and their quality. And we regret that we were not able to fund more. But we are very excited to announce the awards that we are making to collect public input on them. If there are issues with any of these projects, we want to know now on the front end. And to talk through the processes we followed, the determinations we made, and some summary statistics about the awards we made. Ultimately, though, I'll try and move pretty quickly through this initial presentation so that we can get to your comments and questions. So with that, um, as always, a little overview about CDA. We serve as a clearinghouse for federal, state, and local funds for the city of St. Louis, in particular HUD funds, and $177 million in ARPA funds, which we work to deploy to drive economic justice by funding social services, affordable housing, and various other neighborhood transformation activities, all in alignment with SLDC's Economic Justice Action Plan to empower, develop, and transform the city. So these funding cycles, we really ran two simultaneous funding cycles in the spring and summer of 2023. One was the ARPA-funded Neighborhood Transformation Grants cycle, which had $20 million available for housing production, the proactive development of community assets, home repair, and neighborhood beautification and capacity building. The other was housing production, but in a pretty dramatically expanded form. Typically, our HUD housing production NOFA is about $5 million. That's what it was in 2022, for example. This year, we reallocated some of our unspent CDBG and home funds towards housing production and also activated home ARP funds. Although, as you'll hear, we'll be running a new NOFA in 2024 for the home ARP funds as we were not able to award them in full. So just an overview for everyone about some of the evaluation criteria or all the evaluation criteria that we deployed as we reviewed these projects. And every single project was reviewed by 3 or more CDA staff according to these criteria. And you see that on the ARPA side, it was the neighborhood transformation plan, qualifications and experience, then various specific criteria for each eligible use, ranging from financial feasibility to sustainability. Eligible use specific bonus points. These included for housing activating vacant properties and a variety of others. And these are all detailed in the NOFA. I'm not going to go through all of them. And then we also had geographic priority points where we were trying to reverse decades of disinvestment and target funds towards areas that have the highest degree of need, but also significant opportunity in the form of community assets. So what did the applications look like overall? Between both NOFAs, we received 278 applications totaling $276 million. After preliminary eligibility determinations, we determined that 237 of these were eligible, totaling $195 million in funding requests, and we were able to fund 66 projects for a total of $30 million. So you can see that with respect to the overall applications, we were only able to fund a little over 10% of, a little over 20% of all applications, but a little over 10% of the total requested funds. In the next slide, you can see this broken down among the different categories. And so you can see that we were able to fund a very small fraction, unfortunately, of the ARPA affordable housing production applications. That was probably the area in which we were most oversubscribed. You'll also note that unfortunately, a number of the ARPA affordable housing applications were ineligible. And that was either because we were really targeting this towards nonprofits and small for-profits, and a lot of applications we received were from larger for-profit entities, or because a lot of applicants, unfortunately, did not submit a detailed budget in the form of the required pro forma, which was included in the notice of funding availability. So that was a significant challenge, and we are happy to offer debriefs on all of this. Proactive development of community assets was the area where we were possibly even more oversubscribed, with a total of $82 million in applications, most of which were eligible, although some extremely large ones were not. And we were, again, ultimately able to fund $4 million. And this is the full amount that we had available. Home repair is a really interesting case, and I'll talk about it a little bit more under the lessons learned slide. But here, we designed this. If you read the NOFA carefully, you saw that we were kind of bending over backwards to say this home repair eligible use is special. It's not really, it's an RFP, it's procurement for contractors, not just subrecipients or beneficiaries. And every other eligible use, it was a selection process. It was a notice of funding availability designed to select subrecipients and beneficiaries. In home repair, it was half that, and we did award 3 subrecipients, but we also wanted initially to identify contractors. Unfortunately, we came to the conclusion that in order to satisfy the elevated procurement requirements that apply with respect to contractors, it was really wiser to separate this out into a separate RFP, and that RFP is currently open. Neighborhood beautification, we received 47 applications, the vast majority of which were eligible, and just due to the limited availability of funds, we were only able to fund 13 of those for a total of 3.3 million. And in capacity building, also received 49 applications, of which the vast majority were eligible, and we were only able to fund 6. And I'll talk a little bit more about the review process that we followed in a moment, but this is just the summary statistics. And you'll note that we did award our neighborhood beautification and capacity building funds in full. If you sum that $3.3 million together with the $1.1 million, that sums to $4.5 million, the full amount available. And given how oversubscribed we were on everything else, we determined that we couldn't justify funding the technical assistance, the 8 technical assistance applications, although we will endeavor to provide that support as a staff to all of our team, and are exploring alternative funding opportunities for a technical assistance provider. On the HUD side, you'll note that we received $49 million worth of applications, and were able to fund 12 million. On home ARP, even though there were $9.8 million roughly available, we received very few eligible applications. And as with the home repair RFP, we will be issuing a new home ARP NOFA in early 2024, likely in very early 2024, where we are more clear about the requirements, because there were some applications that were not. First of all, there weren't that many applications explicitly for home ARP in general, but in addition, the requirements of home ARP is that you serve a qualifying population, which are really folks who are unhoused, who are victims of domestic violence, who have substance abuse challenges, etc. So there were only 2 applications, unfortunately, that were eligible for that. Or 3, excuse me. Geographic priorities. As we've talked about before, we applied a series of geographic priorities in making our determinations. On the one hand, we had the Economic Justice Index, which includes factors including life expectancy, violent crime, health insurance rates, income, property values, vacancy rates, educational outcomes, internet access, communities of color, redlining. And we use this to aggregate a measure of need. On the other hand, however, we also wanted to invest off nodes of strength. And so we developed this community assets map, and where projects receive bonus points for proximity to schools, to grocery stores, to health clinics, recreation centers, libraries, etc. And you can see in this map of the geographic distribution of the awards that this was largely reflected in terms of how these awards were distributed. I actually apologize. I'm realizing that this map it just includes the housing awards. It doesn't include our more recent awards. But you could find a map of the neighborhood beautification, proactive development, capacity building, and home repair awards on our website. And if we have time at the end of this presentation, once I've stopped sharing my screen, we can try and pull up a map of all awards as well. A few words on the evaluation process. The first thing we did is conduct intake, and all applications received by May 15th were processed by our staff. And I'll note, because I know there was a lot of questions, we did accept any applications received before midnight on May 15th. We processed them, we organized them into Google Drive folders. We created an intake table summarizing key project data, including team name, project scope, work, funding request, eligible use, and actually a bunch of other items. Then we began an eligibility review, and we only struck clearly ineligible applications. We had a lot of conversations about not excluding folks from the rating process unless we were absolutely certain that they were not eligible, either because they were outside the eligible geography or because the application was substantially incomplete. I'll also note that in this process, because we had encouraged team and coalition applications, we had to then split some of these really large applications into their component parts so that each project could be reviewed for both eligibility and ultimately rated independently. Although, as we've discussed, there was a joint team rating component to the score as well. So project scoring, we tasked over 20 of our team at CDA to participate in the review process. Each of the over 200 eligible applications received at least 3 ratings. These applications ranged, as you all know, because we put them together, from anywhere from 50 to 500 pages. So it was a large volume to work through. And we then took those ratings, averaged them, weighted them in a way that I'll explain a little bit more in a moment, combined with the geographic scores to develop the final overall scores. When I say adjusting, here's why that's really important. The best example comes from our housing awards. So in housing, we had 2 teams of 3 that rated all of our housing applications. And what happened, we realized, is that one of the teams of 3 raters was rather more generous in their ratings than the other team of 3. And that wouldn't be a problem, except that what that would mean is that we would wind up funding projects disproportionately that were rated by the more generous team, not because that they were better projects, but simply because they, by the luck of the draw, they were assigned to that more generous team. And so what we did is we adjusted the ratings and weighted them to reflect kind of individual raters' propensity to provide above or below average scores. And then after that, and I did not rate a single project, even though my team often asked me to jump in the fray with them, but I thought it was important that I detach myself from the process. But at the end, I did have to conduct a final eligibility review. There were a variety of projects that, even though we didn't think they were clearly ineligible at the beginning, in the rating process, raters had raised eligibility flags. So I went through those and confirmed a variety and rejected some of those. We capped, I made the determination pretty early on that in order to deploy funds for maximum impact, we would have to set a maximum award cap, because otherwise we would have only been able to make 2 or 3 proactive development awards, or very few awards in general. And so selected to cap the non-housing awards at 500,000. And then we set the funding thresholds and worked with staff to make partial funding determinations. The funding threshold actually wound up working out really elegantly to be 82 points for neighborhood beautification, capacity building, and proactive development. And then worked with staff to go through all the projects and identify the final award amount. And this is frankly where we exercise the greatest amount of discretion and where we are open to continuing the conversation, not in terms of the total award dollars, but in terms of the highest and best use of the award with grantees. And I'll talk about next steps towards the end of this presentation. But that's a really critical one, is we made certain assumptions about which pieces, where partial awards were necessary, which pieces of the project made the most sense, but we are open to revisiting that and having some of those conversations with you all in terms of, again, the highest and best use of the funding amount, although that dollar number is unlikely to change. So lessons learned. The first big lesson learned is the extraordinary capacity of our nonprofit and affordable housing development ecosystem. Again, we were overwhelmed and extraordinarily impressed by the applications that came in and by the visionary ideas that you all are working on. A second big lesson learned, and you're going to see a theme in these next three, is that we created a lot of ambiguity and extra work for ourselves by listing the required application components instead of creating a clear and specific application form. So as we move forward, that's certainly something that you can expect from future funding cycles, and we appreciate your patience working through a very detailed but ultimately somewhat confusing notice of funding availability. In the future, we will also require separate applications for each distinct project. And while we stand behind the spirit of encouraging team and coalition applications, they did create significant confusion, and we will explore better ways to demonstrate alignment and collaboration, to demonstrate and encourage. And another point is we did this all without a grants management system. And that was driven by the fact that we are dissatisfied with our current grants management system. And we have an RFP that actually recently closed to procure a new grants management system. But as we move forward, we will hopefully make everyone's lives easier by creating that application form on the grants management system and filtering all the applications through it. Another lesson learned, which I already kind of walked through earlier, but is that home repair should have been a separate RFP from the beginning, because it wasn't looking to select subrecipients and beneficiaries. It was looking to select contractors as well. So we tried to make that work, but concluded that it ultimately should have been a separate RFP. So award highlights, and this is extremely high level, but we committed $20 million towards the development of, or we are committing $20.2 million towards the development of 952 units, which represent over $200 million in development. This is broken out in a lot of different types of housing, because we think it's very important to invest in housing as diverse as our city, that meets the different challenges faced by folks at 60 or 80% AMI who are looking for an opportunity to build wealth. And that's why we're investing in 20 affordable single family homes. And that adds, it's worth noting, to the over 150 single family homes that CDA is already investing in, as well as the over 50 single family homes which SLDC is working to develop through its revolving loan program. $10.9 million awarded to 12 multifamily projects, which will produce and preserve 866 rental units. And this is really driven by LIHTC, the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program. And it's just a really key part of our strategy in the city, is how we maximize the city's LIHTC awards, because between 2015 and 2019, the city invested $20 million into affordable housing, whereas LIHTC brought in over $150 million of affordable housing financing into the city. And putting in this local match into these projects makes us more competitive at MHDC to receive federal and state low-income housing tax credits, and that's a priority for us. We also, for the first time, we've funded single family homes and we've funded multifamily in the past. CDA has never funded minor rental rehab projects, and really excited to do this for the first time. It'll require us to develop some new processes. We're already debating where the line is in terms of what we need architectural drawings for and what we don't. But we're very excited to work with 6 developers on 37 affordable units at a pretty low cost per unit to bring over a dozen vacant buildings back to occupancy and create 37 affordable units. And we also invested into permanent supportive housing. This will not be rental housing. It'll simply be provided to individuals who are homeless or struggling with substance abuse. And that is $900,000 awarded for the motel acquisition and rehab project. And then in addition to this 20 million in housing awards, we awarded $10 million, as was discussed, towards proactive development, neighborhood beautification, and capacity building. And these projects are so unique, it's really difficult to synthesize or summarize in 1 or 2 metrics, but I do think it's notable that these projects will help activate or maintain over 300 vacant parcels in our city. So with that, our team wanted me to go through every single project. I'm not going to do that. I respect y'all's time too much. I would encourage anyone who has questions about any individual project to raise it in the public comment and question section, and we can turn it over to either myself or our staff who can answer your question. But as you can see, it is really a diverse range of housing. It is a diverse range of proactive development projects, including an early childcare facility, including job training, including a community center, including a farmer's market pavilion, including housing and home repair and capacity building supports to a variety of organizations. So with that, the last comment that I'll make, also a lot of neighborhood beautification, community gardens, and lot maintenance, and neighborhood cleanup projects, a lavender farm. Next steps, I think this part's really important. And we're really kind of operating on 2 timelines. As you may recall, we announced our housing awards August 17th, and our remaining awards on September 8th. So we're a month or so, not behind, but the timelines for housing awards and the remainder of the neighborhood transformation awards are roughly a month apart. But housing award letters have been sent and housing kickoff meetings have been scheduled. You can look forward to seeing the remaining neighborhood transformation grant award letters coming in the coming week or 2, and same with those kickoff meetings. The kickoff agenda will include a discussion of compliance requirements and resources, but also, as I discussed, we want to hear from you all, in particular for grantees receiving partial awards, what you see as the highest and best use of that partial award, and we can update the scope of work and the budget to reflect that. And then our goal for all of these is to have contracts finalized and routing for execution by the end of the year. Before I move on to what if my project wasn't awarded, I will note that projects which don't have, and some of this will be on us as well, a lot of it will be on us as well as on our grantees. But for projects that don't seem to be moving forward by the end of the year, and which we don't have confidence that we'll be able to move forward, we will likely include those funds in a secondary neighborhood transformation grants NOFA, including the home ARP dollars, as well as other HUD dollars, as well as uncommitted ARPA dollars in early 2024, and looking at early February for that NOFA. So we really want to prioritize getting these awards and these commitments moving so that we can commit these funds and spend down the funds. And velocity is really critical here. As you know, ARPA funds must be contractually obligated by the end of 2024 and must be spent by our new deadline is September 30th, 2026. What if my project was not awarded or not fully awarded? First and foremost, we do offer debriefings, and we would really love to connect with as many of you as possible, or as many of you who are interested. And so please reach out, and we will get that debriefing on the book. And you can ask us questions. You can ask us how we can strengthen the application, or you can strengthen the application, etc. Other funding cycles. I'll actually also note you can ask us for your score, and we will share. We will be happy to share your score with you. We didn't publish a list of every application that came in and was rated and everyone's score, because we didn't want to be like that school teacher that shares everyone's grades. But we are happy to share that information with anyone who asks. Other funding cycles that are coming up, we strongly encourage you all to consider applying for the Affordable Housing Commission's annual funding cycle. It's open now and closes. We will drop the information of when it closes in the chat, but it is in October. North St. Louis Small Business and Nonprofit Grant Program. This is SLDC's program to fund a variety of both operating and construction capital costs for small businesses and nonprofits, and strongly encourage folks who are not funded in this CDA cycle to apply. And we will drop details regarding when that closes as well. And I should note that these are really large funding cycles. The Affordable Housing Commission funding cycle, which is typically around $6 million, I believe this year is nearly $20 million, because it includes $12 million in ARPA housing production funds. And the North St. Louis Small Business and Nonprofit Grant Program is making $33 million available. The CDA home repair RFP, as I mentioned, if you applied for home repair as a contractor and were not awarded, please apply to our home repair RFP. We think this will be a cleaner and more impactful way to get to the same place we were trying to go to begin with. And then finally, as I mentioned, we will be opening up a CDA Neighborhood Transformation Grants NOFA in early February, including roughly $9 million in home ARP funds, our CDBG and home housing production funds, at least $5 million, possibly more, and any uncommitted ARPA funds. And then finally, we are engaged in partnership with SLDC in ongoing conversations with private funders regarding how they may be able to fill gaps left by our awards. So please notify us in writing if we can share your proposal. These proposals do include some confidential information, so we will not be sharing any proposals with third parties without your written consent. So with that, I'll end my presentation and open it up for any comments or questions from the public. Thank you for your time. And Tommy, if you want to facilitate this, that would be great.
Sure. We have one hand raised, so I will unmute Jessica and bring Jessica on. Jessica, are you there?
Yes, it was an accidental hand raise. Apologies.
Okay. We have a question in the Q&A from Stephanie. Will grant payments be released as scheduled disbursements or only on a reimbursement basis? They strongly advocate for a planned disbursement model that includes a portion of the grant award paid at the beginning. And it'll ensure that the projects are more successful for smaller neighborhood-based organizations.
We agree, and that's the direction we're interested in going in as well, where possible, but it's not completely up to us. We also need the comptroller's buy-in, comptroller's office and federal grants team buy-in on this. So the default will be reimbursement, but we will explore and advocate for advances and other disbursement models where possible.
Great. I will unmute Myron. Myron, is there a hand raised? Are you there?
Yes, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Great. Yes, we hear you.
Okay, I submitted a proposal to the mayor and the alderman office about, I purchased some tax sale properties that I'm getting ready to, rehab, and also getting ready to get off into building new homes. And the different parts to building these homes and rehabbing, I was trying to involve the youth in it to where they can learn a trade so they can be, build a confidence and also give them something to, learn so they can go into business once they learn this type of stuff. And also trying to figure out how can I raise funding where they can make $200 a day. So those proposals is already with the mayor and the alderman office. And I do have my contact information on there. And I believe this will fit into the neighborhood transformation, program. So just give, if you can, or can I send one of my proposals to you all, which I heard them say that already, but I'm just letting you know that's something that I'm trying to do here in the near future. And also coming up for 24, and then it probably can grow where the young folks can, eventually own their own homes, the ones who ain't planning on going to college, and they will have more options as far as, building their confidence and learning different things about business. That way they will have an outlook and they have more opportunities for certain communities to where it will be, you know, like every community can network with each other and make each other more successful.
It sounds like a great vision, Myron, and I encourage you to share what you shared with those elected officials with us. Something that's really important to emphasize is that because these are federal dollars, and because in the past HUD has instructed us to depoliticize our process, it's really important to apply directly to the department that's administering the funds, and that will conduct an open and competitive merit-based review. So I encourage you to look at those funding cycles that we included in that slide. There's open ones now at the Affordable Housing Commission, although that's really for affordable housing, so it may not be an ideal, or it may be, I don't know. I encourage you to take a look at it. The Affordable Housing Commission, the St. Louis Development Corporation, and then in early 2024, we will reopen neighborhood transformation grants. But feel free to reach out to us in the meantime, and we'd be happy to talk to you about your vision and any ways that we can help point you in the right direction.
Okay, hopefully you'll be available like next week and I can drop the proposal off. That way I can review everything and see what apps need to be filled out. And I need to learn something or get in contact with grant writers also, so I can teach all of this when we go out, in the community.
If you look in the chat, we've dropped some contact information, and if you can reach out to us there, we will be in touch.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate it. That's why I joined in, and now I see it was worth me joining in. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Myron. Let's go. We have some written Q&As. Casey asks, will CDA be providing guidance for team applications that involve fiscal sponsorship of smaller nonprofit groups?
Okay,
I
I can
think
do that.
I think we'll be handling those questions on a case-by-case basis. And so that can be certainly something that we can discuss at our kickoff call, where there'll be an opportunity to ask any questions and discuss any open questions, such as those, and probably many others. And I would encourage us in this discussion and in this Q&A to try to avoid project-specific questions, which really should be discussed in those kickoff meetings, but welcome any public comment on the process or also specific projects if they're flags or anything that we need to know about them. But the conversations between a grantee and CDA can be had in different forums.
We have some hands raised. Let's go to them. Let's bring Linda on. Linda, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Great.
All right.
Thank you, Tom. Linda here with the Community Builders Network of Metro St. Louis. I did send in a written comment, which actually by this presentation that Noel did have actually answered a lot of the questions. So thank you so much for that wonderful and very thorough presentation, Noel. I did have one question in terms of just like funding allocation, because I know initially through the board bill 111 back in the fall with the Board of Aldermen, there was over $14 million that were allocated for neighborhood beautification and capacity building. And you know, I know that number dwindled down to only for $4.5 million when the NOFA was released back in March. My question, which was not, you know, was part of your presentation, was are there or will there be additional funding allocated toward capacity building for CDC and technical assistance? Just because my concern and many of our members who are CDCs and neighborhood associations on the ground doing work every day is was very, very limited capacity building funding that was available and awarded this past September. So our concern and just question moving forward is where will there be additional funding offered, and are there other city departments that we should be on the lookout for as well?
It's an excellent question. So that $14 million line item in Ordinance 71502 was actually a combination of two initially separate line items, which were $4.5 million for neighborhood beautification and capacity building and $9.5 million for lot maintenance and bulk pickup. So the way we are administering that $14 million and why it was combined is kind of beyond me. I thought they should have been left separate. But is that we are entering into a subrecipient agreement of $6.5 million with LRA to fund lot maintenance. And so that'll in the coming summer translate into a whole lot of landscaping contractors and equipment being hired, and contractors and equipment being purchased for LRA to dramatically increase their lot maintenance capacity and efforts. In addition, there is a $1.68 million contract with forestry to purchase additional equipment. This is a long story that goes back to a decision 5 or more years ago to transfer bulk pickup equipment from the forestry department to the streets division. Now we are bringing bulk pickup capacity back to forestry in addition to the streets division. So again, that will expand the city's capacity to pick up bulk items and debris. There's also a $500,000 contract with the refuse department for a bulk pickup contractor. So essentially, the neighborhood beautification component of the 14 million is about $9 million and is being administered through the city's operating departments and through LRA to expand the city's capacity to maintain vacant land and conduct bulk pickup activities. So there are not additional funds available from that 14 million. There's also, I forgot to mention, a 500,000 CDA admin, because the wonderful people on your screen also need to be paid, as well as many other folks. And so the $14 million is currently fully programmed, but would encourage you to advocate for additional dollars to be set aside and made available for capacity building, because we agree it's a significant need. I'll only add that another source of capacity building funds for what is CDBG. CDBG can be used to fund personnel and payroll costs for nonprofits. And one of the constraints that we currently have on our CDBG funds, and we did recently close our CDBG cycle and will be announcing CDBG awards in early October. One of the constraints that we have is that we do not currently have a HUD approved neighborhood revitalization strategy area. And so that's something that we're working with HUD to stand up, and that would free up additional funding for capacity building. And critically, that would be sustainable funding that can be in place past 2026. So long answer and not fully satisfactory, I know, but I think the short answer is The 14 million is fully programmed and encourage you all to continue to advocate for additional capacity building funds. Sorry, last one is the $33 million SLDC funding cycle does include those eligible uses do include payroll and personnel costs. So strongly encourage folks seeking capacity building support, small businesses and nonprofits seeking capacity building support to apply to SLDC's funding cycle.
And to the point of the technical assistance piece, I know one of the questions that I submitted beforehand was just why were there no funding allocated toward technical assistance and in general with these beautification funds that was exceedingly part of that $4.5 million I would offer. 75% of that went toward beautification projects. So in terms of like technical assistance sustainability for the organizations and projects that were awarded, was that part of the consideration? And if not, why was no technical assistance offered, awarded, even though it looks like it looks like $9 million was applied?
Yeah, sustainability was a huge consideration. And one of the reasons why you see that split in terms of a significant, larger amount of funding going towards neighborhood beautification over capacity building and technical assistance. And that's because we were worried that what we were doing with a lot of these capacity building awards, if we had granted them, was growing the organization very quickly for 1 or 2 years before it would be forced to contract back down again. And so we're really have a bias towards investing ARPA funds, which are one-time dollars, into capital, into projects that will physically transform our city and our community, such as neighborhood beautification. Now, that said, we did obviously still award some capacity building funds. And in fact, the other piece of it is that it was really driven by the funding thresholds. The funding threshold for neighborhood beautification and capacity building and technical assistance was all 82. Unfortunately, no technical assistance applications rated above 82, and only a few capacity building applications rated above 82. And part of this was driven because of the sustainability issues we identified, as well as other items. But we would love to expand our support for capacity building. That is an area that CDA has traditionally been very active in. We historically, in the last decades, provided capacity building support, continuous capacity building support to CDCs and neighborhood associations through the city. We believe that if there were a source for sustainably financing that in a way that doesn't cut off after a few years, that would be an incredible value for the city and for our ecosystem. But unfortunately, given the limited time of ARPA funds, we were concerned about not necessarily having the long-term impact that we were seeking.
Thank you.
Let's go to some of the written questions quickly, and then we'll go back to the hands that are raised. How long does it take to receive the grant funds after submissions have been reviewed?
So the way I'm going to interpret that question is when can we expect to receive when can a grantee expect to receive payments? And the answer is that first off, we need to execute the contract. That means, and hopefully we will be able to execute the contract by the end of the year or by early 2024. From there, once that contract is executed, and the city's contract execution process involves, first of all, we will share a draft contract with you all for you to review. You'll review it, share any questions you may have with us, make any edits that we can discuss. Some things are not up for negotiation, but we can certainly discuss any concerns that you may have. And then you all sign 6 copies, we sign 6 copies, and then we route it for execution with approval through the city councilor's office, the comptroller's office, and then a stamp from the register. Typically, this process can take 1 to 2 months. Hopefully, we can make it move faster. But I will also be transparent with you all that one item that is both going to, in the short run, sorry, I'm giving way more information than you asked for, but I want to be transparent, is that I've talked about a lot, I think, in these hearings about the question of subrecipients and beneficiaries. We recently entered into an agreement with Haggerty, a national consulting firm that is helping cities including Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York pull together their ARPA policies and procedures. And one really valuable piece of guidance that they've given us is that a lot of these cities are developing a form of beneficiary monitoring agreement that lies somewhere in between. We need to develop that agreement because ultimately it'll reduce the administrative burden on you all and allow you to receive funds more quickly and effectively. But frankly, it's going to take us at least a few weeks, if not a little bit longer, to develop that beneficiary monitoring agreement. And what, again, that'll do is, because essentially the difference between subrecipients and beneficiaries is that subrecipients, actually I'm not going to get into all the differences between subrecipients and beneficiaries, but beneficiaries historically have been the end user, have been folks who are benefiting from food stamps or Medicaid or whatever the federal program is. And ARPA for the first time allowed nonprofits and small businesses to be beneficiaries. But that opened up a whole range of questions around monitoring. And that's what this new contractual template will resolve and hopefully allow us to reduce administrative burden. But that's going to slow us down a little bit for beneficiaries. Some grant recipients are going to be subrecipients, and we can move forward with those immediately because we have already very developed subrecipient templates. But with all that said, again, the goal is to have contracts routing for execution by the end of the year, have contracts executed early 2024. And as soon as the contract is executed and you have eligible reimbursable or advanced costs, we can start dispersing payments subject to you submitting a pay request to CDA. I feel like that was really confusing. Rashonda or anyone else, can you try and clean it up for me? You're on me. We can't hear you, Rashonda. We still can't hear you, unfortunately. I'm sorry. But the short answer is early 2024. Hopefully would be the earliest that we can expect to begin dispersing payments. I don't know why we can't hear you. All right. Hopefully we can sort that out. But in the meantime, I hope that answered your question. It's a good and important one.
Can I make a quick note with that, with executing contracts? We understand it takes a while sometimes with the city, which that can be frustrating. What's really helpful for us to help that process go faster is to be really responsive with your documents. So when we do reach out for those initial meetings, you'll hear from your monitors that'll be assigned to you with like, these are the list of documents that we need, or this is what we need updated. Timely responses on that help us execute the contract quicker. So I just wanted to make that note. It is a lot of paperwork up front, but like Noelle said, in the effort of transparency, just as a heads up.
Is this working now?
Yes,
it is.
Okay, thank you, Mariana, for stepping in. I really don't have anything else to share besides when you said clear it up, subrecipient versus beneficiary. If you're acting as a subrecipient, imagine yourself as like a tiny CDA. So all of the requirements, most of the requirements that we have, you also have. But if you are the beneficiary, then you have much less reporting and compliance to us and to the federal government. So that's why once we were able to formulate these contracts for beneficiary agreement, it will be less administratively burdensome for some of you that we can qualify as beneficiaries.
thank you, Rashonda.
Let's get to some of these hands that have been raised for a while. I'm gonna bring in Kristen, if Kristen is there.
I think it's Kirsten.
Yes, Kirsten. Are you there?
She had asked us a question in the chat.
Okay, let's bring in Justin. Let's see if Justin's ready.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we
Yes,
can hear
hi.
you.
So I would like to bring to the attention that in your application, it shared that those with no experience in whatever they were applying for would not qualify to receive any of the funding. But when I look at some of the list of the awardees, they have no experience in what they're sharing, but they got some funding. So, for me and the organization that I'm a part of, when we asked you all about, which was pre-development funding, and you all said since we had no experience, we didn't qualify to get any of the monies. But then I look at who you all are commending, and they have no experience, but they do have the support of banks and regional other governmental entities. So they were awarded the money. So I'm just trying to figure out, is there some type of double standard of some sort in this process? Because we feel that we were discriminated against from doing what you all asked of by us not having experience. I didn't know that you needed to have a whole lot of experience with paying someone to get renderings, environmental studies, and things of that nature to get this funding. But like I said, it's people that's on your list that does not have experience that you all award. So I would like to know how and what ways can you explain to me how they were, why were they awarded? Because the same thing I suggested to you all, the Department of Energy has supported my same work. So I'm kind of lost. And my organization, like I said, we feel disrespected because we did what you all said to do. But some people who didn't do what you all said to do got the funding. So does that make sense, Mr. Tom and Ms. Rashonda?
Hi, Justin. You know what? It makes complete sense. What I would suggest, because I don't know your organization, but I see your name is Justin. I think that you should email us directly at cddnofa@stlouis-mo.gov so that we can look at your application. We received
So,
over 222 applications. They were all competitive, and I don't know about the bias, and I don't know who you're comparing your application to, so I can't speak to that. But I can tell
right.
you we are completely open to reviewing your application, sharing how your application was rated, and even debriefing and trying to help you. I also understand that the Department of Energy has SBIR and STTR grants for small business innovation and research, and they have a distinct intention to help novel inventors like yourself, and they've been pushing money for your project. So congratulations on receiving that, because that takes a lot to be able to accomplish and receive funding from DOE if you went through SBIR, STTR. So let's take a look at your application in particular. This is not the last of the funding available. So it may be that the raters for your particular project, you scored lower. Maybe you scored under 82. I don't know if you're in beautification or capacity building or to what extent, but we want to know if the DOE thinks that your project is cool. I'm sure the city of St. Louis will as well. Maybe you just didn't rate as well as the other applications, but let's get to it and look and take a look at your particular project.
I appreciate that. But from my understanding of what was shared to me was that we shouldn't even put one in because we didn't. Because we were going to be a co-applicant, like you all said, let's work together. And when the people had a meeting with you all and they shared what they said that you all shared, we didn't even do the application.
Oh, so we didn't even get to review you.
No, we didn't
Okay,
even
well,
get to review based off of what it says in there. And when they said they talked to whomever, they didn't give me specifics, but when they said they talked to you all about what I wanted to do and like I said, all I wanted was some money for pre-development and acquisition of LRA lots. And they were like, since you don't have any experience, and we got floor plans and renderings, if you all come to my event where the Department of Energy would be at here at the Del Mar Divine on the 27th, you'll get to see some of this. the things that we're creating, and it's all about what you all are talking about, neighborhood transformation. So, but I'm gonna do what you said, Miss Roland, Rashonda, and I
Yeah.
appreciate y'all.
Yeah, please
Round of
do,
applause.
please do, because if you don't apply, we don't know. And I can tell you, Noel shared that we had applications from 50 to like 500, over 500 pages, but we actually had an application of 1 page all the way to
Mhm.
applications of over 600 pages. So some people just applied. And so the next time if somebody gives you a message that tells you don't do something, I would say do it anyway and see. And let's
Okay.
talk to each other on the opposite side of this call at some time, and just send us an email, cddnofa at St. Louis dash, and the rest. It's in the chat, and then we can see about the future funding cycle. And if you do
Okay.
rate well this time, maybe we can help out.
So is the application still available for me to
No.
go? So how can I make a draft one? Because I can show you or talk to you. I'm gonna do what you said.
Yeah,
I'm
do that.
copying this
You
email. I'm
and
copying the
Myron.
email.
Yes, you and then Myron was on the call earlier. There will be more funding cycles. Just CDA, this particular one has already been provisionally awarded. And then there will be more funding cycles via CDA and with SLDC. So just keep a lookout. Thomas put some links in the chat, and there will be more to come. Don't give up.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Justin. We have a few questions in the chat. A pretty common question is kind of, I think if we could talk about the timeline again, from the provisional awards being announced to when letters will go out to awardees, to kickoff meetings, and then when funds should start to arrive. And will those be reimbursements, or will those be direct payments? If we could just go through that really quickly.
Award letters will start going out next week, and then kickoff meetings will be scheduled thereafter in the coming weeks. With respect to payments, as mentioned, the default will be reimbursement, but we have been able to persuade the comptroller's office to approve of advance payment schedules in other circumstances, and hopefully we will be able to do the same in some of these awards as well. Part of this is going to be subject to a risk assessment. And that's going to be an important piece of the kickoff meeting as well, is we may have certain questions that we need to have answered in order to properly fill out our risk assessment questionnaire.
There's a question here. I think this might be more about future funding cycles. What grant is more appropriate for investors that do not live in the properties and they use them for rent as rentals?
And I'll assume that this individual is seeking to rehab the property, or that would be our housing production funds. But please bear in mind that CDA invests in the production of affordable housing. And so there are deed restrictions that come with our funding awards.
We have a
So
question.
Sorry, to continue on, specifically, CDA is not the only entity that invests in affordable rental housing. The Affordable Housing Commission does as well. So I would encourage you to look at their funding cycle, as well as CDA's next neighborhood transformation grants funding cycle, which will include housing production again in early 2024.
We have a question in the Q&A. People really want to know about those beneficiaries. What's the criteria for determining beneficiaries? What tools or measures will CDA use to determine for that determination process?
So that is a question that we currently have into Haggerty, and we are awaiting their response. We do have a draft subrecipient / beneficiary checklist, but we are waiting on Haggerty to review it before we can start applying it. So we will have more details on that to come, but I don't want to get into more details in case they change.
Here's a question. Were there any instances where there were awards without letters of support? Can we get into specifics or kind of, I think, describe within the entire rating process and all that criteria, what role did letters of support play?
So letters of support were one way in which we measured the degree of community support for a project, which was associated with a number of points. I think the raters can probably be more precise than I can in terms of how many points explicitly community support. 5 points. So community support counted for 5 points, and letters of support were one way that we counted that community support. Almost every project that applied, however, had letters of support. And I don't know, I'll toss it to our team if you all can speak to any projects that that did not have letters of support that were awarded. I don't believe there were, but
I believe, but it is part of that large criteria for every project. There are many ways of getting points after becoming eligible, and letters of support were part of the entire rating process that included many factors.
yeah, but it was not a requirement, but in practice, almost every project that applied included letters of support.
There's a question here about the administration of these grants. Will we, CDA, have more Zoom calls for folks that were awarded to help them prepare for all that paperwork coming up to be compliant with this grant and to participate? I believe I know the answer, but I'll pass it to you all.
Yes, again, those will be the kickoff calls. It's going to be the first one. And at that kickoff call, we can also set up a schedule of ongoing check-ins with each grantee. However, if there's interest from the group, we can also explore having regular cohort calls or meetings so that we can learn from each other as well. And that's something we're open to exploring as well. But the really critical first step is we will set up one-on-one kickoff calls for every grantee and CDA staff. You will be assigned a CDA monitor who will be your point of contact and project manager from CDA's perspective for the grant. And you will work with them. They will provide you with technical assistance and support to pull together all the documentation compliance that you need. And then you can always reach out to us at any time if you have any questions. But also if there is interest, we can certainly explore pulling together kind of bigger TA sessions where we provide an overview of compliance requirements or workshops for the cohort as a whole.
I think this next question from Sandra is really about more about what CDA does in terms of our different funding cycles. She asked, are the transformation grants different from, I assume, the housing NOFA? I know that when we're talking about neighborhood transformation grants, we're just going to bring in all the housing production projects as well with that great, cool new brand neighborhood transformation. That's what CDA is committed to. So I think maybe thinking about what we're working on now in terms of preparing to administrate and then looking forward to future years, different CDA funding cycles or opportunities, if the team could describe that.
Yeah, so historically, CDA did 2 funding cycles a year, our spring housing production NOFA and a fall CDBG non-housing production NOFA. The non-housing production NOFA was 90% social services, public services, youth services, senior services, workforce development, reentry, health, et cetera, early childcare, et cetera. But we did occasionally fund these larger facilities improvements or economic development projects. What we're looking at doing moving forward is that we're going to have and so that's what we did historically, 2 funding cycles. This year, we did 3 funding cycles, where we did our HUD housing production NOFA, our CDBG non-housing production NOFA, and these neighborhood transformation grants, which were ARPA funds and designed to be highly flexible to respond to neighborhood needs and included proactive development of community assets, neighborhood beautification, home repair, and capacity building. Moving forward, what we'll do is we'll go back to doing 2 funding cycles, but our spring funding cycle is really just going to be focused on construction capital investments into the built environment. And so that includes housing production, but it could also include other proactive development of community assets. And so that's how we'll kind of expand that one to include some of those other neighborhood transformation categories. So it'll be a neighborhood transformation funding cycle in early 2024, including and really centered on housing, but not limited to housing, as well as our CDBG funding cycle focused on social services and capacity in the fall. And I should note that we also have kind of miscellaneous funding cycles that we do put out as needed. For example, we recently did a $2 million RFP for early childcare workforce development, which we awarded to 6 variety of early childcare providers and nonprofits. So there will always be these little one-offs as kind of funding is made available. But overall, we're trying to go back to having 2 big funding cycles, one in the early 2024 or early in the year, and another in August/September.
There's a question here from Cassandra, planning their future budget. I think asking more about timing on when funding can be received for their reporting. Should they anticipate for this funding cycle to create budgets for 24?
Absolutely. I think it is unlikely that we'll be able to disperse any funds before the end of the year. I think that it'll depend in part on how quickly both CDA and our grantees can move, but I think our goal is to have contracts executed by the end of the year or early 24, so we can start dispersing funds in early 24.
Great, and related to that, here's another question about how the funding gets to the recipients. Is it a reimbursement model or is it an advanced payment model? And then maybe get into how that reimbursement typically works for organizations doing this type of work in the community.
We've answered this a few times, but I'll go into more detail with this one. So again, reimbursement model will be the default. We will explore advanced models in special circumstances. The reimbursement model, the way it works is that each entity needs to submit 2 reports to CDA on a regular monthly basis, typically. And that one of these reports is a programmatic report where you tell us the work you did, the outputs that you delivered, and the other is a financial report where you tell us, here's the money we spent. In the case of a reimbursement request, what the reimbursement request says, look at our financial report, here's the money we spent, look at our programmatic report, here's the outputs we produced, and therefore we request this reimbursement. We look at that reimbursement request, which goes to our fiscal team. Our fiscal team connects with our compliance team, which has received the programmatic report to make sure that the program is generating the outputs, and that pay request is submitted to the comptroller's office to clear the check to go out. That's the reimbursement. The advanced model works very similarly. It's just that instead of telling us what you did, you tell us what you're going to do. And so the advanced pay request model says, here is our anticipated expenses in this next month period or whatever the schedule is, and the outputs that we plan to generate, and therefore we request this advance. And then what will happen in the way we've gotten the comptroller's office to be okay with our advance models is that we only advance a fraction right? And we demonstrate that we've received the programmatic and financial reports that substantiate and demonstrate that those expenses actually happened before we make the next advance tranche payment. And so that's the model that we've developed and that seems to be working for a couple of other contracts. It's something that CDA has never done before. And so we really are exploring the best way to make this work. And we've piloted in a few contracts thus far, and it seems to be working okay for now. But we will continue to advocate for that. It's something that we want to be able to do. I think that the policies and procedures manual will also help us take this from something that we've done as a pilot with some special contracts where there's a real strong case to be made that it would not work otherwise, that it could not possibly work on a reimbursement basis. And perhaps it's something that we can do more of moving forward. But for now, the default remains reimbursement. But we encourage you, if you believe that, and I'm sure that many of our grantees do have a strong case to make, that their project cannot possibly work on a reimbursement basis and they require the liquidity of an advance basis in order to execute the project, we will fight and advocate to try and get that approved.
Great. There's a question here from Teresa, anticipating another NOFA in February of 24. Well, do we think that will be neighborhood transformation grants? Will it be similar categories? And will neighborhood beautification be a part of that?
It may be, but it'll be a lot smaller. And part of it depends on what fraction of the projects that we've awarded move forward. If every single project that we've announced awards for moves forward, then it will not be additional. And unless the government appropriates additional neighborhood beautification funds to us, there will likely not be additional neighborhood beautification funds available. But we will have a large tranche of home ARP, $9 million for permanent supportive housing, as well as supportive services. We will have additional CDBG and home housing production funds, and we will also explore whether we can set aside some CDBG funds for neighborhood beautification. But it really depends on what fraction of these ARPA commitments and ARPA projects that we've currently committed move forward. And that's also, by the way, why I should note that we keep on calling these provisional awards. And that is because our number one directive is we need to get all these funds committed by 2024 and spent by 2026. And so all of these projects are provisional in that the funds can be clawed back if we don't if we don't see that the grantee is making adequate progress towards the expenditure, the compliant expenditure of funds.
Great. Back on this reimbursement question, will CDA reimburse money that is spent before a contract is finalized?
Oh, what a great question. We were debating this yesterday. That's a question out to Hagerty. Pre-award costs are a tricky question.
And then you mentioned how these are all provisional because we want to make sure that as CDA commits funds, these projects are actually going to happen. That's why we have a great monitoring staff that works with our grantees. This question says, we anticipate that not everything will move forward, so we call provisionally. What are some reasons that something might not move forward?
Examples include if the grantee was non-responsive or was not able to provide us with certain documentation that we needed in order to comply with ARPA regulations. Now, to be clear, we have a lot of confidence in the grantees that we've selected, and we're really excited to work with everyone, and we selected them precisely because we have that confidence. But just probability and statistics suggest that 1 or 2 projects may fall through for whatever reason. And so we just want to be cognizant of that.
There's another example. If you received a partial award, but that award just is not enough for you to accomplish the goal. And so you say, thank you for giving us 50,000 when we asked for 1 million. We will send you this 50,000 back. So that's another example. Or not send it back. We don't accept it. And feel free to give it to another community member who needs the 50,000.
And then another question, looking forward to future funding cycles. Will and when we offer a training for the upcoming housing NOFA? I'm not sure we have it scheduled, but I know we will have similar public hearings and trainings for people interested in applying for our next funding cycles.
Yeah, I'll toss that to Stephanie if there's anything you'd like to add. I will say that we have already begun our kickoff calls with housing award grantees. But Stephanie, is there anything you would like to add?
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Noel. So generally, we do an applicant workshop pretty closely following the release of that housing NOFA. So being that we do have a tentative timeframe in early February, we haven't yet set the release date. Once we have the release date locked down, then we will be able to schedule that applicant workshop. And if you are not on our email list, please let Tom know and we can add you to that list so that you will receive a notification when the NOFA is live and available, and then also any additional workshops, trainings, and public hearings related to that.
Thank you. And I am dropping a link to subscribe to our newsletter in the chat. We just started a few months ago, and I hope everyone is enjoying it. It's the best place to get all the info about CDA opportunities, funding cycles. We have several open positions here at CDA, some RFPs out for home repair and other opportunities to work with us here at CDA. Let's get back to some of these questions. This is just a very brief follow-up on that question about when funds do not go to an awardee, do they actually get reallocated to other organizations? What happens to funding that we provisionally award but don't actually award?
Yes, we will. And that's exactly why we are holding that follow-up neighborhood transformation grants funding cycle in early 2024, is that anything that is not committed will be awarded through that funding cycle in early 2024, so that we can get everything under contract before the end of 2024.
Great. And related to that upcoming funding cycle in 24, if a partial commitment was made in this funding cycle that we're discussing now, can this project start and then request additional funds in that next round?
Yes, absolutely. Although bear in mind that the vast majority of the funds available in that next round will be HUD funds. And HUD funds come with additional compliance requirements that could slow the project down further. But that is a conversation that we can have certainly one-on-one between grantees and CDA, is whether we think that adding another source of HUD funds would be feasible or might in fact jeopardize the project.
I am looking for some new questions. I'm in the chat, so if anyone here still has a question, you can go ahead and just raise your hand. You can get into the webinar chat or go over to the Q&A. We are here to answer any questions you have about neighborhood transformation grants and all the categories and exciting steps moving forward to bring these projects into reality. So we're excited to be here. And we're here to talk to you. We have some staff on the call. If there's anything that hasn't been asked that you think maybe the public should, feel free to jump in and contribute to this really lively discussion about neighborhood transformation grants.
I see a good question in the chat about the timeline for reimbursement upon request. And it discusses a probable 2-month delay to reimbursement, and that's certainly possible and has precedent. It is also possible that it can move significantly faster. But given the 1-month reporting timeline, it typically lags a month and a few weeks. But it kind of depends on when the expense is incurred and when that financial report is submitted, when the pay request is submitted. Once the pay request with the supporting financial report is submitted to the comptroller's office, they can often turn it around pretty quickly within a week or two.
Here's a question from the Q&A. So someone, I assume they submitted a budget within their application and they are an awardee. What would the process be if they need to change something in their budget?
We will have that conversation between CDA and the grantee. Until the contract is executed, we have flexibility to amend the budget, provided that the uses are eligible and in accordance with the original application. Once the contract is executed, it would require possibly a contract amendment, or actually it would require a contract amendment, and that can take time. So we really want to lock in the budget with contract execution. That's why that's going to be the kind of, there's going to be both the compliance conversation, getting everything in order, but there's also the substantive conversation that we will have between CDA and each grantee is finalizing your budget.
Great. There's a question about where to see the list of the provisional awards. You go to that St. Louis stlouis.gov/CDA/neighborhood-NOFA. And there at the top of the page, there's a link to two news items on the city's website, one announcing housing production, and then the other one announces the other categories. We'll also be publishing the slide deck that you just saw on that page, CDA/neighborhood-NOFA, as soon as this meeting is done. Now here's a question here. When will kickoff meetings begin for neighborhood beautification?
In the coming weeks.
Great.
On the note of kickoff meetings and like starting projects and things like that, as more of a technical note, I do want to make it clear that the way CDA does like KPIs and outputs and criteria is what we call them, is a little bit different than other contracts that you may have seen. So just don't be alarmed when we're asking you a lot of questions as we meet. The best way I like to describe it, just to give a little heads up, is like when we're asking for KPIs, our output is what we call it, is like what you're doing, and then the criteria is how you're doing it. So if you guys can be thinking about that before those meetings, if you were awarded, that really helps contracts go faster.
And then those KPIs are going to translate into your programmatic report, which is what you'll be reporting on a monthly or regular basis to CDA. And that will be part of the contract as well.
KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator. We use a lot of acronyms around here, so I just want you to stay with us. Key Performance Indicator, KPI.
Do we have any other questions?
I'm scrolling through the chat to see if there's anything I missed. And CDA team, if I missed anything, let me know or just shout it out. We are here for you, the public, who came to ask questions to get answers. So put them in the chat, raise your hand, put it in the Q&A. Just let us know what you'd like to hear, or learn more about, or expand upon. Questions, comments, observations. This is your opportunity to ask questions, but also provide your feedback and input on any part of this process. And so we are here to learn from you. It is a beautiful Friday afternoon, so I understand if you're ready for us to wrap up, but I won't make that call until we're sure that we've answered all of these questions. So please, please, please don't be shy. Just let us know. Team, is there anything that you think we've missed?
I just want to thank everyone for your time, for the work that you put into your applications. We're so excited to get to work with you to realize your vision. And I want to really strongly encourage any folks who were not awarded to please reach out to us so that we can have that debrief and we can explore or help connect you to other funding opportunities. There were so many excellent projects that we really, really liked that we were not able to fund. And just because we can't enter into a grant agreement and contract with you all, it doesn't mean that we want to end the relationship, and we want to be as supportive as we can. So thank you for the work that you put into the applications, and please do reach out.
There's a quick question. Will notes from this call be emailed to us? Maybe. I will be publishing minutes from this meeting. And this meeting is also being simultaneously live streamed on YouTube right now. And it will be posted on the city's YouTube page with a link to that from our website, that city website /CDA/neighborhood-NOFA. So anytime you want, you can come back and watch this meeting again. And we'll also, once those minutes are available, probably next week, we'll have a link to those, this meeting, and more info on that website /CDA/neighborhood-NOFA. And I'll plug it one more time. If you go to that CDA homepage, citywebsite.gov/CDA, right there, scroll down, subscribe to our e-newsletter. That's where you'll get updates on more meetings for neighborhood transformation grant awardees, future funding cycles, other RFPs that CDA has. CDA is also hiring several positions to help administer all these funds to the best and fullest and greatest compliance to our federal partners. So lots of information in our e-newsletter.
I just dropped in the chat SLDC's nonprofit and small business link. It is still open until October 30th at 5 p.m. So please take a look at that link, and maybe you can get additional funding for the great work that you're doing in the city.
On that note, I think we'll close out.
Okay.
Thank you all very much. Thank you to our team. Thank you to everyone who applied.